What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Steelers Breakdown podcast here. Nick Farabaugh here with you as always. And I have a guest with me today, Chris Halicke of DK Pittsburgh Sports. Chris, one of the best doing it. Me and Chris kind of nerd out on football all the time, whether it's at practice or text, whatever. But Chris, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. And I wanted to have Chris on today to talk specifically about something a lot of you guys have asked me about. Aaron Rodgers' fit in Arthur Smith's offense. How much control does he have? Is Aaron Rodgers going to do, the whole takeover thing? Like, what's it going to look like, right? And Chris, you and I have talked about this, oh, I don't know, a month now, I think, since
A
we,
lot.
right. You called me one day. I was at a card convention in Monroeville, and Chris called me while he was driving, and we were just talking about this. And let's talk about it because I don't think a lot of people realize Arthur Smith's offense is a Shanahan offshoot. It's an offshoot of the Matt LaFleur offense. He was under Matt
Mhm.
LaFleur in Tennessee when he was the tight ends coach. And while it's not completely Shanahan, you have some Mike Mularkey stuff in there, and you have some
Mhm.
other influences, of course. It is a Shanahan offshoot, and Smith is close with Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell, Stefanski, of course, LaFleur, all of them.
Mhm.
And so when people talk about fitting it in with Aaron Rodgers played 4 years under Matt LaFleur. This is kind of interesting. It kind of fits better than you think, doesn't it?
It really does. Like I think when Arthur Smith was first hired, like everybody just assumed that this isn't, they wanted like the next young guy that was going to come from the Shanahan or McVay trees or something like that. And it's like, well, Arthur Smith kind of comes from that. He's not. I wouldn't call him directly from the Shanahan tree, but Rodgers almost flat out said it, like whenever he was addressing the media. So it really is interesting that like where Arthur Smith kind of fits because no, he didn't directly coach under Kyle Shanahan or Mike Shanahan. Obviously, wasn't part of that entire coaching staff in Washington from 2010 to 2013. That was just loaded with all kinds of coaches. But no, he definitely was heavily influenced by Matt LaFleur. And you really, really see it. And you really saw it, especially in Tennessee. Everybody just wants to say, "Oh, Arthur Smith was only successful because he had Derrick Henry." Well, no, I mean he used that to his advantage for sure, but the Shanahan influence was absolutely there, and that was at a time in which the Shanahan offense was also humming really, really well, and that's why Arthur Smith was one of the most prominent offensive coordinators at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, we think about it, right? How much wide zone they ran last year. Even though it
Yeah.
was a down year of wide zone, they were still fourth in the NFL
Yeah.
in wide zone. They run a lot of wide zone. They run a lot of inside zone. They have started to shift into some gap stuff, just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
every Shanahan kind of person has. And
Hmm.
that's something that I think we're going to continue to see this year. I do believe we're going to see a lot of power, and still, I think we're going to see counter and different things like that pop in on the gap side.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that Aaron Rodgers, specifically when you look at the routes he likes to throw, quick slants, digs, things like that.
All kinds
We
of
didn't,
stick. Yeah.
right, we didn't see a lot of it last year, right? We didn't see a lot of it. We didn't see a lot of basic Arthur Smith concepts last year just because Russell Wilson and Justin Fields very much were focused on, if they were in the middle of the field, it was seam balls. And if
Hmm.
it was mostly, those out routes, those nine routes, the go balls. Now, plenty of those are still going to be in Rodgers' repertoire. He likes those back
Right.
shoulder fades. He likes
Hmm.
the nine routes. He likes the curls. He likes that stuff. But I think we're going to see a lot more of those slants, those digs, things that are intermediate in that intermediate area of the field. Even if Aaron Rodgers doesn't love to throw in the middle field compared to the average quarterback,
Right.
Chris, we did the numbers on this. I mean, it is pretty stark. He still is a much, much more kind of involved thrower in the middle of the field than Russell Wilson or Justin Fields was.
Yeah, I know you did a lot of your homework on the stuff. I know I did a lot of mine too. And the thing that I came across more than anything was just the lack of throwing to the middle of the field out of play action for the Steelers. And even whenever they did, they were fourth fewest in the NFL last year in terms of targeting the middle of the field out of play action. But then when they did, they were terrible at it. The numbers were just atrocious. And that pretty much takes out when we talk about the Shanahan offense and a lot of the stuff that's in Arthur Smith's playbook. Now, neither one of us have Arthur Smith's playbook on hand, but we can go to the tape and we can see what all is there and what all once was previously there when he was in Atlanta and in Tennessee. And it's like the entire high cross series of the Shanahan playbook is just gone
Right.
last year. Like we're talking about Ryder, Burner, Blazer, Rage, all that stuff. It's like very, very minimal. And the thing is, the few times that they did run it last year, usually it was successful hitting that high cross, or Russ just was gonna throw the deep ball no matter what, even if the high cross. There was one in particular I remember against the Ravens. I can't remember if it was the playoff game or if it was the road playoff game late in the season, but it was a complete. It was whatever one had the completed go ball to Calvin Austin down the sideline. Scotty Miller was even. I mean, to say wide open is not even doing it justice. He was wide bleeping open on the high cross, and Russ is just like, screw this, I'm throwing the go ball. And so you're whenever you bring in Rodgers, he's got at least 4 years of playing under LaFleur, who's again, it's going to be very, very similar to what Arthur Smith wants to run too. So it's a much better fit with Aaron Rodgers than it was with Russ.
How many times, you mentioned the Hawaii crossers, which is a little more complicated. How many times did we see them even run just drift? And
I can't remember it,
I mean, I
honestly.
think there were three times I remember being run, and Fryermuth was open on two of them and
Hmm.
did not get the ball. And
Yeah.
so, and then the third one they actually executed. It was Calvin Austin's touchdown against the
Oh
Chiefs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was drift. Yeah.
So they did have at least three, but I remember they put Pat Fryermuth in a lot of the middle of the field areas.
Hmm.
Just didn't throw the ball to him. I know people, were kind of lower on Fryermuth after last year for some reason. I think he had a really good year. Just didn't get the ball when he should have. He was open a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think if Rodgers really focuses on getting the ball to his tight ends, and historically he really does like to get the ball to his tight ends, I think Freiermuth is going to have a really nice year. And so Rodgers kind of in this fit. You talk about
Yeah.
opening up those series. Roman Wilson, you drafted this guy to literally run crossers and
Yeah.
overs and drags and
Yeah.
horizontal routes. Huge for him. Calvin Austin, I think, is as he's a good vertical field stretcher, but I'm interested to see what he can do as a horizontal field stretcher.
Hmm.
And then you have DK Metcalf, who, some people have kind of been talking about they didn't see the fit with DK and Rodgers. The slants, this is how DK Metcalf catches footballs on 5 yards to turn them into 80-yard touchdowns. This is
Yeah.
how he's historically done this. So I think there's fit here. Now, I do think, when we're talking about, okay, kind of breaking things down, egos, all that stuff, the behind the scenes stuff, slant it out, get it going. But this is why Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith have been talking far before he even signed. They're kind of diving into the playbook, seeing what to take from Aaron's kind of perspective to do with arts. How can you kind of mix in the under center play action, heavy tight end stuff with the gun, empty
Hmm.
stuff that Rodgers likes to do. There's a lot of differences that Rodgers under the McCarthy did. So this is probably going to be this offense is going to be an interesting mixture of what Arthur Smith likes and probably a Mike McCarthy-ish offense. So
Hmm.
I think we're going to see more gun, more empty this year. But I'm interested to see how Rodgers looks under center. And one of the takeaways I had away from minicamp was, Chris,
Hmm.
I thought Rodgers looked pretty good when he was moving on rollouts. Like I did. I understand it's just in shorts, but like, hey, I think that guy can go under center and get me a bootleg every now and then. He sure looks like he could.
Listen, I'm going through the entire Jets season last year, watching every single offensive snap, and just so I can get a good feel for the situation that Rodgers was in. Not only obviously to also break down Rodgers' performance, and I'm 5 games in right now. Rodgers, even early in the season, coming off of Achilles, I've seen some people call him a statue. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. He's not nearly as mobile as he used to be. There's no question about that. That just comes with age. But to say that he just is incapable of moving is just not false. Or I'm sorry, it's just not true. It's completely false. He, especially when the defense gives it to him, if the defense goes in full blown man and he's able to get out of whatever trouble there is and all the backs are turned, he will go get yards if he needs to. There have been, shoot, man, even the game that was atrocious last year for Jets all involved when they were in London playing the Vikings. Even then, he had some pressure, stepped up, and kind of went to his right and did one of those very patented Rodgers, like under pressure, and just threw off of his wrong foot and just found Alan Lazard in the end zone for a touchdown. A lot of that stuff is still there, man. I mean, and we're seeing it in minicamp too. The arm is still there. And yeah, he's moving a lot better than people want to give him credit for. So I do think you're going to see a little bit of stuff where they're going to move the pocket, and I do think you're going to see some still of those 3 level play action concepts that where you do roll the quarterback out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was one thing, you could see. I'm not exactly saying that, Rodgers is going to be running, read options here. He's not.
No.
But
No.
what he will be able to do, I think, is at least move around a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
certainly still to me, lots of pressure you can put on, Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu and those guys to kind of take those steps forward. But I do think we look at Rodgers and say, okay, there's at least functional mobility there. I think that's
Yes.
the important thing. And some of these stats that we kind of dug up, Chris,
Hmm.
I thought were just completely kind of looking at it. I mean, it looked more like a Matt Canada offense in terms of middle of the field uses last year than
Yeah.
it did an Arthur Smith offense. Because you even look at Arthur Smith's past offenses, even in Atlanta when he had Ritter and Mariota and, just a lack of talent, to be quite honest, at the quarterback position,
Right.
still, they pushed those dig routes, those kind of anticipatory throws over the middle of the field. And I do think, this is something that they're going to do this year. And when you look at Rodgers and how he kind of plays football, he plays it risk averse because he's got one of the best kind of turnover percentages, whether that's interception percentage ever in the NFL. So that fits the Steelers. But he also has this knack for making these throws over the middle of the field on those drag routes, on those digs, and especially, I don't know if there's a route he likes better than throwing slants. I mean, that's the big thing. How many times, like, can you recall last year just seeing an actual slant route being thrown?
It wasn't.
It was like not in the playbook,
It
right?
was not very often. You didn't see a lot of dragon lions executed, which is some of the most basic, quick game stuff that you go back to high school and college. You didn't see a lot of that stuff. Not that Arthur Smith is going to be like this guy who's just going to throw a whole bunch of that stuff anyway, but it also depends on the quarterback. And I think Arthur Smith has talked a lot about that, both throughout this week at minicamp and even going back to the draft. It's like, listen, whenever we build the offense, we're building it to the strengths of our players. It doesn't make a lot of sense for him to build an offense that's going to say, "Hey, Russ, you've been in the league for a long time. You've played a game a certain way, but we're now going to make you throw to the middle of the field all the time, or a lot more than you normally have." That's not going to work. It's just not. It's not what he wants to do. It's funny to me because you look at Russ's numbers when he actually does target the middle of the field. They're actually pretty good. He just doesn't do it that often. So it wasn't a good fit last year between what Arthur Smith wants to do, his strengths as an offensive coordinator, and then the quarterback that they had. And then also in the running game, Najee Harris not being the greatest wide zone, outside zone runner, and Arthur Smith that being kind of the foundation of what he wants to do in terms of running the football. It just wasn't a great fit. And so now this year, when you look at Aaron Rodgers and his experience running Shanahan concepts, and quick game and West Coast and all this kind of stuff that's usually part of the Shanahan offense or offshoots of it, along with Jalen Warren, Caleb Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell, those guys being able to run more outside zone, wide zone, it's a much better fit this year. I think you're gonna actually see a much clearer picture of what Arthur Smith wants to do as a coordinator.
100%. I think it fits nicely into what they do.
Hmm.
I think Rodgers at least gives them a fit and a vision for an offense that is efficient. I think that's a big thing because you
Right.
look at the kind of per yard stats, just per drive stats. The Steelers are in like bottom five, bottom 10 in every single efficiency stat. The Steelers were very much boom or bust, and when the boom wasn't there, that's when you saw it just stall out late in the year.
Hmm.
And so the Steelers need to be more efficient, both on the ground and through the air. But I think the big thing is going to be can they get the passing game to work in synchronicity with the run game? Because if the run game is a more efficient group, can they knock them out of two high shells? Can they get these single kind of matchups on the outside for DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin, Pat Frymuth? I do think, we look at this offense and we think okay, it's a little more talented, right? The O
Right.
line should be better. You got Caleb Johnson, who everyone's super excited about. You got DK, who people think are better than George. Most in the organization. You got Rodgers, again, probably a slight upgrade from what you had last year, not just in terms of talent, fit. So all this feels like better, but if it doesn't result in more efficiency and I think consistency, that's a big flag for the Steelers because it means what's going on here and how much of a talent issue is this compared to just a fit issue, or do we have the OC thing just completely wrong?
Yeah, the one thing that I was, just as somebody who is a fan of offensive concepts of in the game of football, My personal favorite offense in the entire league right now is Sean McVay. I love the way that he has gone from, doing a lot of the same Shanahan stuff that we saw, especially late 2010s. And then as the league progressed, he went to everything's 11 personnel. And then we're gonna mix that with making every play looking the same because we're in the same personnel all the time. But now instead of running all the wide zone, outside zone stuff, now we're just gonna run gap to death and attack you downhill. And it worked out with Kyron Williams and all this stuff. And so and then Shanahan himself, Kyle Shanahan, like he's gone to more gap stuff over the years too, or in recent years too. So I begin to wonder, like, okay, are the Steelers going to be behind on this again? Like, are they going to be behind on, okay, when Arthur Smith was we talk about Aaron Rodgers at the height of his powers. When Arthur Smith was at the best situation he's ever been in was 19 and 20. That's when outside zone and wide zone was shredding defenses. Shanahan was doing it, McVay was doing it, Arthur Smith was doing it, and then several other coaches were doing it. Are they now behind the eight ball on this? Our defense is now too good at defending it. I still think it can work because it gives the running back multiple lanes to attack. You have a primary attack point, and then if you have running backs who know how to run it and how to view it and have the vision to execute it, then it can still work because it's a gap. It's kind of one hole or it doesn't work. So I do kind of wonder, are they going to be behind the eight ball? But I also could see it working if you have the right personnel. It's going to be interesting. I think this to me is a really good like experiment to see if the Shanahan offense from like the late 2010s can still work in the mid 2020s.
I think that's probably about right. And I think they do need to implement more gap. I also think this is going to be a good litmus test just to see where Arthur Smith is and if they need to
Mm-hmm.
make a move there. I think that's a good litmus test to see if that can fit. So let's talk about these numbers because we've been talking about these numbers. I found the numbers, Chris. Let's talk about the play action dropbacks from last year. The Steelers had 15 play action dropbacks, the fourth lowest in the NFL last year.
Yeah,
And when they actually did target the middle of the field, they had a measly 6.27 yards per attempt on play action over the middle of the field. That's hard to do, which tells you a lot of it was just play action, the running back leaking out and checking it down.
pretty
So
much.
that's something to think about. The A dot lowest in the NFL. First read percentage, 30 seconds. So they were just passing up the obvious digs and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. It took them somehow, even with that average depth of target, 3.3 seconds to get rid of the football
Yep.
and the highest check down rate in football. So the Steelers were doing this play action stuff. It took them long to develop, and it
Yeah.
took them a very long time to get to a basic read that maybe got them 4 to 5 yards. Here's Aaron Rodgers' numbers when targeting the middle of the field on play action. There were at least double the amount of throws in Aaron Rodgers' tape last year than there were here, which still would have only given you 15th best, but much better. Um, his passer rating, 130. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty solid. He had 6 touchdowns, only 1 pick. His average depth of target was 12.3 yards per attempt on these throws, and the throw time, 2.74 seconds. Pretty interesting. It's a lot different than Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. It really
It,
is.
it, yeah, it really, really is. And what's funny about that, and that those were Rogers numbers from last year, you
Yes.
said? Okay, so that's under Nathaniel Hackett, who's obviously another, member of the same tree. But when he was the OC in Green Bay, we all know that Matt LaFleur was the real brains of the operation. Um, when Rogers was in Green Bay, the numbers were even more dumb. Like his last MVP season, when he targeted the middle of the field out of play action, he had a 158.1 passer rating. Like we're talking pretty much perfect when you're talking when you're attacking middle of the field out of play action. Now the next year he threw it to the middle of the field out of play action more often, and his passer rating went down. It went all the way down to, oh God, 108. Like it was
Mhm.
still a good passer rating when doing it while throwing it more often. So defenses were obviously, understanding, okay, this is how they're going to attack, and we're better prepared for it. But also, Rodgers himself wasn't as good. That's when we first saw the real drop off in 2022. Even then, if they get 2022 version of Aaron Rodgers, which you look at the numbers, it wasn't all that great. I still think you have a major upgrade over Russell Wilson based off of fit alone. And then you can take all the other stuff to that goes along with it with possibly some more interceptions than Rodgers typically throws, whatever it is. But I think it's still a much better fit
Yeah, and I
this
mean
time around.
let's talk about these 4 years over LaFleur, just to put you in context here.
Hmm.
38.5% of his attempts were targeted towards the middle of the field. That's still about 8% less than the league average. So we're not saying, the Steelers are suddenly going to become Brock Purdy, right? Brock Purdy who
Right,
just throws dig routes like every other route. We're just saying maybe a little more frequency here than never, which was last year basically. He completed about 77.3% of those passes on 9 yards per attempt. That's a whole yard higher than the rest of the league. Last year, the average on the middle of the field depth of target was about 10.1. So Rodgers actually was much, much ahead of the league in terms of his average depth of target over the middle of the field last year. But in these Green Bay ones, he was about a yard higher and a little bit higher on that. He ranked 15th with 22 attempts over the middle of the field out of play action in 2021. And then on 2022, he actually had 37 attempts, but he had a perfect passer rating on those in 2022. So that was just interesting, I thought. So there's going to be a little bit more here. I think a little more opportunity to get DK Metcalf. And I say DK Metcalf because this is where the ball is going on these plays
right.
to get DK Metcalf loose and try and get those explosive plays. If you can have a more efficient rushing offense, and what I mean is if you can just get a solid rushing attack with the success rate not in the lower half of the league or
Right.
even average. Because last year they were a volume based rushing attack that was one of the least efficient in the entire NFL.
Hmm.
Largely, I think, due to quite honestly poor schematics and poor fit. I thought, he forced the issue with Najee too much. Stop running that darn toss play, Arthur. I could imagine saying it all the time, but there's so many different things that you would look at and you say, man, it just doesn't fit. The personnel this year fits more. Jalen Warren, Caleb Johnson, Kenny Gainwell, all more of his type of running back.
Right.
So theoretically, this should be a more efficient offense. But how efficient? I don't think, we should be talking about a top 10 offense. It doesn't have the talent, I think, at receiver to be that.
Hmm.
And the O line's still young. Caleb Johnson's going to take time to get going. So I do think, that's a little crazy to think about. But the Steelers last year were about, I don't know, 20th, 21st best offense. If you put everything together, smush them all together, somewhere around there, 20th to 25th, somewhere in that range. They were in that range. If this year they can comfortably get themselves into like 15, I
Yeah.
think that's a win for them. And that's really what they're kind of banking on is just getting a little more efficient, getting a little bit more of that high highs. I think that's what the kind of thing is here is can you find Rodgers magic every now and then where you can
Hmm.
go toe to toe for a little bit with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, even if it's just for a game? Do you have the ceiling to go out there? And if your defense is getting shredded like they were in Baltimore, can your offense go toe for toe, even just at their peak, even if they're inconsistent? Because I think this offense is going to be very Jekyll Hyde. They're going to have really bad games. I think they're going to be all up and down. Don't look at Rodgers' numbers against the blitz. I'm telling you, don't look at them. They're pretty ugly. So there's definitely weaknesses with Rodgers' game, but do you find those peaks? I think that's where we're looking for Pittsburgh this year.
Yeah, and going back through the Jets film last year, watching Rodgers whenever he would handle the blitz, there were a couple things that I've taken away from that. Number one, Rodgers would definitely start to get skittish as games wore on, especially if he was facing pressure early and often. If he, like, for example, one of the games early in the season, literally his first drop back, he took a major shot. And then it was just like one out of every three dropbacks from that point on, he was either under pressure or he was taking a hit. And by the time the third and fourth quarter rolled around, he was like, if my first read's not there, I'm checking it down. I'm tired of getting hit. And not saying that's right, not making excuses for the guy, but he was 40 years old. He's tired of getting hit. And that's part of that is on the Jets offensive line, just being absolutely atrocious and especially not being able to handle stunts. They couldn't handle stunts to save their lives last year. That was a major problem. And so then you get teams like Denver and Minnesota who smell blood in the water and they start blitzing like crazy. And then that offensive line gets even worse. And I also didn't like whatever the protections were in Nathaniel Hackett's offense. I didn't like those either. A lot of those protections didn't attack for where the free runner was going to come from when you're facing, a zero blitz or something like that. It was weird. It was just a gigantic mess in New York last year.
You, you mean the
Mess.
Nathaniel Hackett offense doesn't make sense? You're
Oh my
shocked.
gosh. Oh,
FYI,
I'm not shocked, but it's one thing to see it every now and then, but to go through play by play, I'm only 5 games in. I'm like, man, alive. How do they get through 17 games? It's no wonder they were a 5-win team. They were awful.
yeah, and FYI, the Steelers' offense got shredded by Blake Bortles and Nathaniel Hackett in the 2017 divisional game. So just wanted to bring that up.
I'm gonna always die on the hill though. I will always die on the hill that Steelers team was going to go to the Super Bowl, if not win it that year, if Brian Shazier did not get
I
injured.
don't disagree, but man, wow, what a loss that was.
You know that team was absolutely devastated after Ryan got injured. Like the writing was on the wall pretty much the second that injury took place.
Yep, it 100% was, man. But we talked a lot about Rodgers and his fit and where this offense can go. Let's just talk about some minicamp takeaways. I like to
Yeah.
wrap things up, the day after minicamp. Let's just kind of talk through this. What was your kind of biggest takeaway? Whether it was from what you watched, what you heard, what was the thing you kind of came down with and said, this could be a driving force for this team this year?
Well, the one thing I really wanted to watch during minicamp for me, because my personal view of OTAs and minicamp is I try to not take too much stock in the actual on-field stuff. That's my own personal approach to the job because at the end of the day, as Mike Tomlin says, this is football like stuff. You can watch Max Hurlman freaking look amazing in running routes when he's facing absolutely nobody. How is it whenever he's facing legitimate defenders, on the other side of the line of scrimmage? How does he look whenever he's having to deal with, okay, am I going running this route against zone? Am I running against man? Like actually breaking down the actual X's and O's. For me, I wanted to look at Aaron Rodgers, how he looked physically, but then especially once we saw he wasn't taking part in team drills, how is he staying engaged? How is he showing any kind of buy-in? And I saw absolute, just almost probably annoying Arthur Smith with how much like those two were talking. Uh, Plenty of times in which he would like be holding his helmet up to his ear, listening to the call as Arthur Smith was calling the play, and then he'd say like he was even like saying the play out loud afterward as if he were in the huddle. Just messing around and chatting with Jack Sawyer and other guys you wouldn't think that he would be ever chatting with. You get the normal, like, oh, he's going to chat with the other quarterbacks and the offense coordinator and the tight ends and the receivers, but even chatting it up with the guys on the other side of the ball. Seeing the way that he was engaged on the field and in the locker room, I thought was really encouraging. He's shown every bit of buy-in that he possibly can. And I think that's a really encouraging thing for this team moving forward because so much of the concern for the fan base was he's taking forever. He's not really committed. Well, the little bit that we've seen so far, 3 days of minicamp, everything's looked just fine in terms of buy-in and being committed to being a Steeler.
Yeah, I do think that's important. I had two takeaways. One, I really wanted to watch DK Metcalf and how he worked because he has this reputation coming out of Seattle, right? Where it's like, he's a crash out on the field.
Mm-hmm.
He's a highly emotional guy. But I wanted to see him, because you watch his tape in Seattle, and sometimes he's lackadaisical. And, it's like, is that because the effort's not there, or is it because he's maybe just not detail oriented at sometimes? I thought that was one thing that stuck out this week was the effort question. I mean, no question. He's running down the field with Jalen Warren on every rep.
Right.
He's calling out guys that aren't putting in the effort. I mean, the guy cares. So that tells me when he gets mad, his stuff, his kind of he earnestly kind of believes in competitiveness and wants to win, and that's
Yeah.
kind of where that comes from. That's a good thing to have that fire, that competitive fire. And so I thought that was really encouraging. I just love the way he practiced. He went hard on every rep. It didn't matter if it was
Mm-hmm.
an individual rep. He didn't jog it. He went full speed. He was doing it like it was his last rep every day at practice. He was mentoring Joey Porter Jr. I thought that was really good. Joey Porter Jr. had trouble against him in his rookie year, and he was kind of talking with Joey about here's how guys set you up, here's how to defend, guys like me. When we're talking about Joey Porter Jr. in week 7 facing T. Higgins, I'm really interested to see how this kind of works out. I think facing DK can be so beneficial for a guy like Joey. So I think DK is going to be a very positive contribution to this locker room
Right.
leadership, the way he goes about practices. It's just, I think, a really good thing to have a guy like DK in there. And then the other one I was really curious about, just in terms of kind of how the defense went about their business.
Hmm.
How did they come out after getting absolutely shelled by your divisional rival? One, there's a chip on this team's shoulder. I don't care what anyone says. Ask anyone that was on that team last year. They feel it still. There's a driving force behind this team. But more importantly, the absolute just concrete kind of you look at the teaching, the instruction from Gerald Alexander and Scott McCurley on communication. Guys, they are not having what happened last year again. And not only are they not having what happened last year again, they're running more than they were last year. I remember last year we were saying, oh, there's just spot drop cover three all the time at minicamp. Here you're getting exotic blitzes, you're getting disguises. If you aren't doing your job on those, you bust it. You hear them yelling at them. If you're not even just kind of, if you're giving a thumbs up and you're not giving a thumbs up back, you hear somebody yelling at you. It doesn't matter if it's a coach or a player.
Hmm.
These guys are serious about communication. I think that's a very good thing to have down this early so it doesn't pop back up in November, in December. You don't have to fix it during the season. I think that's a really important thing. The Steelers are kind of motivated to come out here, and so the defense's focus on communication really shined to me. And it's something that they're really focused on. And I think they're going to fix this year. I think they're going to be a little bit more diverse on the back end. I think they're probably going to
Hmm.
blitz a little more this year. They're going to try and mix things up. They're not going to just play spot drop cover three. They're not just going to sit back and play vanilla stuff this year. I think there's a real effort from the coaching staff and the players to say, we're going to work on all that now. So when it comes to September, we're going to be able to pull out our bag of tricks and not just line TJ Watt up on the same side every time. Like, I just think things like that, we're going to see a little bit more from them this year defensively, and they need it because the predictability on defense last year, to be quite honest with you, is unacceptable for an NFL team. You can't play spot drop cover three like they did so often last year. You can't not just, you mix up your two high coverages and then you run quarters and you bust quarters. Like they ran
Right.
quarters and they would bust it. They busted spot drop cover three a few times
Yeah.
last year. It was unacceptable. And so I think that's something that at least they're focused on this year, and hopefully their work shows through when they get on the field.
Yeah, not to try to plug my work or anything like that, but I did just write a Friday Insider on DKPittsburghSports.com, and I had a one-on-one with Patrick Queen, kind of talking about this whole thing and talking about the entire breakdown that they had because they had a completely different strategy than any other NFL team when it came to defending the read option against the Ravens, and it worked really well in the first game of the season when they or the first time they met, and then the Ravens adjusted and they didn't figure it out. And then by the time game three came along in the playoffs, they were like, well, let's try a mixture of what we used to do and what we're doing this year. And it still didn't work. If anything, it went even worse. Um, that alone was a gigantic kick in the pants to the entire defense. And yes, there will be a lot of different things. And there is I can definitely confirm that there is a lot of new things on defense. People will be like, "Oh, it's still Mike Tomlin, it's still Terrell Austin." I'm telling you, just from the little bit that we saw, and we can only report on so much based off of obviously what we see at practice. But I don't think that they're going to be rolling the 2024 defense back out there again this season. That's a very very firm bet for me.
Yeah, I agree. And if they do, I will hammer them for it again. So we will talk about that if it comes to it. But either way, Chris, thanks for coming on, man. Make sure to tell people where they could follow you, read your work, listen to you, all that great stuff.
Yeah, all my work is at dkpittsburghsports.com in our Steelers feed there. All the articles that I write, the podcasts I do, the Chalk Talk videos that I do that break down stuff, it's all there in our Steelers feed. It scrolls just like a social media app. It's phenomenal the way you can find the content there. And then you can follow me on social media, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, all at Chris Halicke. That's where I'm not on social media that much. I'm not much of a social media guy. Let my work do it, speak for itself, kind of. So definitely, I would go to dkpittsburghsports.com to find my work there.
Chris does a great job. Make sure to go check that out, guys. Patrick Queen story is sure at the top of the Steelers feed, so make sure to go check that out if you want to read it. Folks, make sure if you want to read my stuff, go to penlive.com/Steelers. All my stuff's over there. You can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh Blue Sky Nick Farabaugh. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for more of the Steelers breakdown. I'll be back on Monday. We'll have Jack Hillgrove on that day, so that'll be a nice guest as well. I'm trying to get more guests on here. Make sure to leave your questions below. I keep saying that to you guys. I will try and answer them, especially because we're entering this dead period, so make sure to do that as well. Thanks for watching, everybody.